When humanity first appeared on the edge of the galactic map, no one really paid attention. To most alien civilizations, Earth was just a tiny blue planet, spinning around an aging yellow star, tucked away in a quiet corner of the spiral arm. The great powers of the galaxy were already busy fighting endless wars and making endless alliances. They had seen hundreds of new species rise and fall, some brave, some foolish, most forgotten. At first, the humans didn't seem like anything special. Their technology was rough, their ships looked plain, and their colonies were small. But there was something about them that made the galaxy uneasy, something hard to define. They expanded fast, faster than any species had before. They built ships out of things no one else dared use, sent explorers into places where no sane pilot would go, and treated danger like an old friend instead of an enemy. The first time alien observers watched humans working together in space, they saw something strange. The humans didn't argue about who would take command or which world belonged to whom. They acted as if they were all part of the same cause, a cause that even they couldn't fully explain. It wasn't greed or pride or conquest. It was survival. For them, war wasn't a game of honor. It wasn't something fought to show strength. Humanity's entire history had been built on conflict, not just with others, but with nature itself. They had learned to live through storms, famines, plagues, and self-made disasters, and somehow through all of it they kept moving forward. When the galaxy first learned their history, there was silence. Billions of years of interstellar peace had softened most species. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle. But humanity's story read like a nightmare. Wars that lasted centuries, weapons that could burn worlds, and yet somehow, despite all that pain, they survived and built again, stronger each time. So when humans finally joined the Galactic Council, the older races were curious, but cautious. Some saw potential allies. Others saw a species too unpredictable to be trusted. A few, especially the powerful empires, dismissed them entirely. One of those empires was the Krathan Dominion, proud, ancient, and cruel. They ruled hundreds of systems and had crushed every opponent that dared to challenge them. To the Krathan, humanity was just another minor civilization, a new toy to test their fleets on. The humans didn't even know the Dominion existed until one of their outpost colonies disappeared. No warning, no distress call, just silence. The next week, 2 more colonies went dark. When the first surviving ship finally limped home, its hull torn apart and its crew shaken beyond words, they brought back a message, a recording from the enemy. The voice was cold and mechanical. The translation harsh. You were warned not to expand. The stars beyond this border belong to the Krathan Dominion. Your kind will serve or vanish. No one in the human fleet command spoke for a long moment after hearing that. The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was focus. Humanity had been threatened many times before, by their own kind, by nature, by extinction itself. They had always survived, and they weren't about to stop now. Across their colonies, workers stopped building homes and began building ships. Old factories that once made farming tools now produced armor plating. Scientists worked day and night, combining human creativity with alien knowledge gathered from the Council. Within weeks, the first human defense fleets were born, rough, heavy, and not beautiful by galactic standards, but brutally efficient. To the galaxy's older races, it looked like overconfidence. They whispered that the humans didn't understand what they were up against. The Krathan fleets had destroyed entire civilizations before. No species had ever won against them in open war. But the humans weren't planning to fight an ordinary war. They studied every scrap of data they could find, every ship design, every movement pattern, every weakness the Krathan had shown in past battles. They didn't prepare for a fair fight. They prepared to end the fight before it began. When the Krathan fleet arrived, the galaxy's eyes turned toward a small sector known as the Draxian Cluster, where the first major human defense line had been built. Millions watched through long-range sensors, expecting the humans to be wiped out in minutes. After all, the Dominion's fleet was 3 times larger with weapons that had never failed. But that's not what happened. The battle began with silence. No transmissions, no bright energy blasts, no long speeches. The Krathan ships entered human space, and one by one they began to vanish from every scanner. At first, the observers thought it was a system glitch, but then came the reports from surviving outposts. Entire squadrons gone without trace. Some said the humans had built a new kind of stealth technology. Others believed they were using gravitational traps. But those were just guesses. The truth, no one could confirm it. The few Krathen ships that returned spoke of chaos, confusion, and death coming from nowhere. Their sensors saw ghost signals. Their targeting systems failed. And every time they tried to regroup, the humans struck again, faster and sharper. When the battle finally ended, there were no victory celebrations. The humans didn't broadcast their success or boast about what they had done. They simply retrieved their damaged ships and left the battlefield silent. To them, it wasn't glory. It was survival, nothing more. The Galactic Council sent probes and investigators. What they found was chilling. Hundreds of wrecked Krathen warships drifting through space, their power cores shut down, their crews gone. No signs of life, no struggle, just emptiness. It was as if the fleet had been swallowed by the void itself. In the following weeks, stories began to spread. Alien traders told of human fleets moving without sound, ships that seemed to flicker in and out of reality. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of a species that didn't fight like anyone else. They didn't attack for dominance. They struck to end the fight before it began. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was afraid. Not of human weapons, but of what they represented. A species that had learned to adapt to anything, that had faced extinction and still stood tall, was now walking among them. The humans never bragged about what happened in the Draxian cluster. They didn't have to. Every empire that watched the battle knew the message without words. Humanity had arrived, and they were not to be underestimated. What made it even more unsettling was how calm they were afterward. When questioned by the council, human representatives simply said, "We defended ourselves. We didn't start this war." There was no anger in their voices, no pride, no joy, just a quiet certainty, the kind that comes from experience, not arrogance. In the months that followed, trade with human colonies doubled. Some species rushed to make alliances, hoping to stay on their good side. Others watched from afar, nervous and uncertain. The Krathen Dominion, once feared across half the galaxy, went silent. Their fleet stopped patrolling human borders. They never launched another attack, and yet no one truly knew what had happened in that first battle. All they knew was that humanity had entered the galactic battlefield, and entire armies had vanished soon after. Some said it was technology. Others said it was strategy. But deep down, every species who had once thought themselves superior began to understand something they'd long forgotten. When you push a species that's been fighting for survival since the day it learned to stand, you awaken something that doesn't play by the usual rules. Humanity wasn't there to conquer. They weren't there to impress. They were there to survive, and that made them the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen. After the strange silence that followed the first attack on human colonies, the galaxy waited to see what would happen next. The Krathen Dominion, known for its arrogance, didn't take their defeat lightly. Losing even a single ship was a wound to their pride. Losing an entire fleet without explanation was an insult they couldn't ignore. Across the stars, their leaders gathered in anger. To them, humans were nothing more than newcomers who had gotten lucky once. The Krathen believed they ruled by right of strength, and they were about to prove it again. Within weeks, they assembled the largest armada anyone had seen in 100 years. Thousands of warships, each carrying weapons that had destroyed civilizations before humanity even reached the stars. Every corner of the galaxy tuned in. News networks, military analysts, and curious onlookers all turned their eyes toward human space. They called it the Second Encounter. Some said this battle would be the end of humanity's short adventure among the stars. Others said it would be the beginning of something new. The human fleets were smaller, lighter, and far less advanced by galactic standards. But what they lacked in power, they made up for in something the galaxy had forgotten: creativity and unpredictability. Every human ship was different. Some were repurposed freighters turned into warships. Others were newly built, fast and flexible. Their designs looked uneven, almost clumsy, but each one had a purpose. When the Krathen Armada crossed the border into human territory, they didn't find lines of defense or massive space stations. They found emptiness, dark systems, silent stations, and no sign of resistance. It looked as if humanity had fled, but they hadn't. Hidden inside asteroid fields, behind shattered moons, and within the magnetic storms of dying stars, the human fleets waited in silence. They didn't move, they didn't transmit, and they didn't reveal themselves. Their ships had gone dark, powered only by minimal systems invisible to most sensors. It was an old strategy, something the galaxy considered outdated, but it worked. The Krathen commander ordered his ships deeper into human space, spreading them across several systems to search for targets. That's when the disappearances began. At first, it was small. A patrol squad lost contact. A few ships failed to report back. The Krathen command thought it was interference. But soon entire sectors went silent. They sent scouts, but even those vanished. No explosions, no debris, no distress calls. Just empty space. From afar, galactic observers began to panic. The broadcast networks couldn't explain it. Sensors picked up nothing unusual. To them, it looked as though the Krathen fleet was simply being erased from existence. Inside the human command ships, things were far less mysterious. They were calm, focused, and working like clockwork. Every move was calculated. They had studied their enemies' patterns and learned their weaknesses. They didn't rely on brute force. They used speed, deception, and timing. When a Krathen fleet entered a system, human ships waited until the enemy's communication was stretched thin. Then, using false signals and decoys, they made the enemy chase illusions. Human pilots lured large ships into gravitational traps, asteroid belts, and minefields disguised as debris. Once the Krathen ships were isolated, the humans struck, fast and silent. The Krathen ships had stronger shields and heavier weapons, but they were slow. Their commanders had never fought an enemy that didn't follow the rules of war. Humans didn't stay still. They didn't form neat lines or wait for orders from a central command. Every small group acted on instinct, communicating in short bursts, using coded signals that changed every hour. In one battle, a single human corvette led 6 massive Krathen destroyers into a gas giant's atmosphere. The larger ships fired blindly, their sensors blinded by static, while the human ship used the planet's magnetic field to vanish. When the destroyers tried to pull out, their engines failed, crushed by the pressure they didn't understand. None of them made it out. Stories like that began to spread quickly, even among the Krathen ranks. Fear started to grow. Their crews whispered that humans were ghosts who fought like shadows. Some even said they could hear strange signals on open frequencies, a heartbeat-like pulse that appeared before every ambush. No one could explain it, but it broke their nerves. Meanwhile, on human ships, there was no celebration. No laughter, no songs of victory. Every soldier knew what was at stake. They didn't fight for glory. They fought because they had to. They knew what would happen if they lost. Their colonies burned, their people enslaved, their world turned to ash. They weren't fighting to win medals. They were fighting to make sure humanity survived another day. In the command center of the main human fleet, officers moved quietly around glowing holographic maps. Every red dot that disappeared meant another Krathen ship gone. Yet no one cheered. They had all seen too much war on their own planet to think of it as something glorious. One officer, watching the tactical board, whispered to another, "They still think this is a war of numbers. They don't understand it's a war of will." That was the truth. The Krathen had more ships, more guns, and more resources. But humans had something far more dangerous: the refusal to give up. By the 4th day, more than half the Krathen armada was missing. Their command ships tried to retreat, but by then, the trap was complete. Human fleets had encircled them using jump routes the Krathen didn't even know existed. It wasn't a single decisive strike, and it was a slow collapse. One by one, the enemy's ships vanished into darkness. To outside observers, the entire battle seemed impossible. Drones sent to record the fight captured only flickering images, flashes of light, debris drifting, strange energy signatures, and then silence. When the transmission returned to the Galactic Council, the room fell quiet. No one could explain what they had seen. By the end of the week, the largest fleet in Krathen history was gone. The few surviving ships stumbled back to their home worlds damaged and silent. They refused to speak of what happened. All they said was that the humans didn't fight like living beings. Rumors spread faster than light. Some said humanity had discovered a weapon that could erase matter itself. Others said they had learned to bend reality. But those who studied the records saw something different, something even more frightening. The humans hadn't used superweapons. They had used knowledge, patience, planning. They had turned every strength of the Krathen into a weakness. Their size, their structure, their pride. Humans fought like they had done on Earth for centuries, by turning the battlefield itself into an ally. For them, it wasn't war. It was problem-solving on the edge of extinction. When the fighting ended, the human fleets didn't advance or occupy conquered systems. They simply turned around and returned home. They didn't boast or demand surrender. They didn't even issue a warning. To them, it was finished. But across the galaxy, fear began to grow. If this small young species could erase one of the most powerful empires without even revealing their full power, what else could they do? In the halls of the Galactic Council, ambassadors spoke in low voices. Some called for peace treaties with humanity. Others suggested containing them before they became unstoppable. But deep down, every leader knew the same truth. No one wanted to face them in battle again. The Krathen Dominion, humiliated and broken, fell into silence. Their propaganda claimed they had chosen to end the campaign, but everyone knew the truth. They had been destroyed not by superior weapons, but by superior minds. Weeks later, a single transmission was picked up on open frequency. It came from an unknown source somewhere in human space. It was short, calm, and clear. The war is over. We defend what's ours. Nothing more. No one ever traced the signal, but the message was enough. Every major power in the galaxy stopped their military expansion near human borders. Trade routes shifted. Diplomats began to send quiet offers of friendship. Even the most arrogant species learned to speak softly when discussing Earth. The galaxy had seen wars before, but this was something new. It wasn't just the power that terrified them. It was the precision, the quiet certainty, the lack of pride. Humanity didn't fight for control. They fought to survive, and that made them unstoppable. From that day forward, no one dared to underestimate them again. The galaxy had watched humanity enter the battlefield, and entire armies had vanished. But the real mystery wasn't how they did it. It was how calm they were afterward, as if it had been inevitable all along. And somewhere in the cold emptiness of space, the last echoes of those battles drifted among the stars, silent reminders of the day a young species showed the galaxy that survival was its own kind of power. After the great silence that followed the battles, the galaxy was restless. Every world, from the richest empire to the smallest colony, was talking about one question: how did the humans do it? How did a young, inexperienced species erase one of the most powerful armadas ever built, without anyone understanding what really happened? No one had clear answers. The Krathen Dominion refused to speak. Their few surviving ships were sealed away in their home systems, their captains hiding behind walls of secrecy and shame. The Galactic Council formed special investigation teams to study the wreckage, to understand the mystery behind the vanishings. But when their scientists reached the battlefield, they found only floating debris, no bodies, no survivors, and no trace of the great fleet that once filled the void. The human ships were long gone, leaving behind nothing but silence and broken metal. Rumors began to spread faster than light. Some claimed humans had discovered a weapon that could erase entire ships in an instant. Others said they had made deals with unknown beings, ancient powers sleeping in the dark. A few even whispered that the humans themselves were not entirely mortal anymore. But deep inside, those who studied humanity closely knew the truth was far more grounded and far more terrifying. It wasn't magic. It wasn't alien technology. It was something much simpler: strategy, intelligence, and patience. The humans didn't rely on superweapons or forbidden science. They relied on something no one else had anymore: the will to adapt and outthink every opponent. They studied everything, every small detail, every pattern, every behavior of their enemies. Before the battles, human analysts had watched endless recordings of the Krathen fleet. They studied how their ships turned, how their weapons charged, and how their captains made decisions. They noticed that the Krathen always fought the same way: direct, organized, predictable. To the Dominion, war was a dance they had mastered long ago. But to humans, war was chaos, and they were born in it. On Earth, they had fought thousands of wars with millions of unpredictable events. Weather, hunger, betrayal, and emotion, they had learned to survive every kind of disaster. Their instincts were built on uncertainty, and that made them impossible to predict. So when the Krathen came with their grand formations and their perfect order, The humans simply broke the rules. They didn't meet them head-on. They split their fleets into hundreds of small groups, each one free to make decisions on its own. To the Krathen, this looked like madness. But in truth, it was genius. Each small fleet acted as bait, drawing the enemy deeper into traps. The humans used space itself as a weapon, hiding inside gas clouds, using planetary magnetic fields to blind sensors, planting mines in the paths where enemy ships would most likely flee. They didn't fight for territory. They fought for control of the environment. It was said that before each battle, human commanders didn't ask how many ships they had. They asked what the field looked like. To them, the stars, the gravity wells, and even the debris from old wars were tools they could use. When the Krathen ships entered a system, they expected an enemy fleet waiting for them. Instead, they found silence. No life signs, no signals. They would spread out to search, confident in their strength. That's when the humans moved on, silent and fast. They used decoy signals to create illusions of fleets where none existed. When the Krathen turned to attack, they found themselves firing at empty space. Meanwhile, the real human ships struck from behind, disabling engines and weapons in seconds. Before the enemy could even call for help, the humans had already vanished again. To the galaxy, it looked like a ghost war. But for the humans, it was all planned. They used electronic warfare, camouflage fields, and light manipulation tech, all tools other races had abandoned because they were too primitive. Humans, however, made them deadly by using them with precision and creativity. They even created false communication networks that sent out fake distress calls, luring enemy rescue ships into ambushes. Some human fleets broadcasted ghost signals that mimicked Krathen command codes, confusing their formations and making them turn against each other in panic. It wasn't the power of their weapons that won the battles, and it was the power of their understanding. The galaxy soon realized something unsettling. Humans didn't fight for domination or resources. They fought to end conflict as quickly and completely as possible. They didn't waste time or life. Their tactics weren't about pride. They were about making sure the enemy never had a second chance. That's why entire armies vanished. Not because humans destroyed them recklessly, but because they cut the enemy's heart out before it even realized it was bleeding. One council observer later described it best. The humans don't fight wars, they delete them. The most shocking part wasn't what humanity did on the battlefield. It was what they didn't do afterward. After each victory, they didn't occupy territories or demand tribute. They didn't enslave or humiliate the defeated. They simply left. To many alien leaders, that was the most frightening thing of all. A species that could destroy entire fleets but chose not to rule afterward. That was a species with true control. The Galactic Council sent a delegation to speak with the human representatives, hoping to understand their thinking. When asked how they managed to win against impossible odds, the human spokesperson gave a simple answer. "We learned how to survive a long time ago. War just happens to be another test." Those words spread across every communication network in the galaxy. For the older races, it was a revelation, a reminder of what they had lost long ago. Most of them had evolved past violence, trusting machines and traditions to guide them. Humanity, however, had never forgotten that survival required effort, adaptability, and the courage to face chaos without flinching. Soon, military academies across the stars began studying human strategies, but no one could fully replicate them. The secret wasn't in the machines or weapons. It was in the human mindset. Humans were unpredictable because they were emotional. They could be terrified one moment and fearless the next. They could turn panic into creativity and failure into victory. Where other species saw disaster, humans saw opportunity. That's what made them so dangerous, not their power, but their way of thinking. A Krathen officer who survived one of the battles described it perfectly. "They didn't fight us like soldiers. They hunted us like predators that had learned every weakness we had." To the galaxy, those words sent chills. The humans had done what no one believed possible. They had taken the cold, calculated world of space warfare and turned it into something deeply human. Every decision they made carried emotion, instinct, and an understanding of fear, both their own and their enemies. They didn't erase fleets to show dominance. They did it because in their history, losing meant extinction. They weren't trying to win trophies. They were trying to make sure there was a tomorrow. By the end of that year, humanity had earned a new name whispered across the stars: the Death Worlders. It wasn't meant as an insult. It was a statement of respect and fear. It meant they come from a world that kills everything soft, and that's why they survived everywhere else. Even though the humans never claimed the title, it stuck. Every major empire began rethinking its own defenses. Old generals who once looked down on Earth now studied its history, its wars, its crises, its will to survive, and quietly, in dark meeting rooms, alien leaders began to make decisions that would shape the future. Some wanted to ally with the humans, some wanted to avoid them. A few even wanted to stop them before they grew stronger. But one thing was certain: no one wanted to fight them again. The mystery of the vanishings remained unsolved for most species. Only the humans truly understood what had happened. But they didn't talk about it. They didn't reveal their methods. They didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves, because when the galaxy looked into the darkness of space and saw the wreckage of the Krathan fleets floating silently, everyone understood the same thing. Humanity had changed the meaning of war forever, and from that moment on, every power in the galaxy watched the humans differently. They were no longer just newcomers or explorers. They were survivors, and the galaxy knew that when survivors fight, even empires can vanish without a trace. After the mysterious disappearances of the Krathan fleets, peace returned to the galaxy, or at least the kind of peace that comes from fear. The stars were quiet, but not calm. Every empire, every trading union, and every military command was whispering the same question: what will the humans do next? No one had dared to attack them again since the Great Vanishings. Borders that once were lines of fire had turned into walls of silence. Merchant ships rerouted their courses to avoid human space. Some did it out of fear, others out of respect. The humans never asked for tribute, never demanded anything. They just watched, but peace built on fear never lasts long. Far across the spiral arm, the Zorath Empire, proud, disciplined, and vast, had been observing quietly. For centuries, they had considered themselves the true rulers of the galaxy. Their fleets were massive, their science unmatched, and their leaders believed they had mastered every kind of war. When they heard about the Krathan disaster, they laughed. To them, the Krathan were reckless brutes. They believed humans had simply been lucky. The Zorath Emperor made a bold statement that echoed across every channel of communication. "Luck is not power. We will remind the stars who commands them." The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. They were coming for the humans. At first, the Galactic Council tried to stop them. Even the most warlike species urged caution, but the Zorath Empire ignored all warnings. They prepared their fleets, confident that their advanced AI systems and massive dreadnoughts would crush the so-called Death Worlders. But humanity had already seen it coming. From the moment the first Zorath scouting probes entered neutral space, human intelligence networks began to track them. They didn't respond. They didn't send threats. They just watched, quietly, patiently, as the Zorath Armada moved closer, thinking they were unseen. When the invasion finally began, it was called the Vanishing Campaign by historians, though the name came much later. To the Zorath, it was meant to be their grand victory, a chance to prove that the humans were not gods or monsters, but simply a primitive race that had gotten too much attention. The fleet they sent was enormous. Thousands of ships, each one carrying technology far beyond anything humans had shown before. They had energy shields capable of resisting suns, weapons that could vaporize moons, and predictive AIs that could calculate millions of strategies per second. To them it was going to be easy, but the humans were not planning to match power with power. They were planning to use understanding. When the Zorath Armada entered human space, they expected resistance. They expected fleets and fortresses. What they found was emptiness. Again, dead systems, dark planets, no communication, no ships. It was as if humanity had abandoned their worlds. The commanders grew overconfident. They spread their fleets wide, sending ships to every corner, looking for targets. That was exactly what humanity wanted. The first to disappear were the outer patrols. Ships sent to scan asteroid belts stopped reporting back. Then entire squadrons began vanishing near gas giants and nebula clusters. The main fleet ignored the signs, believing it was interference or minor skirmishes, until the first transmission came in. A terrified officer screaming that the stars themselves had turned against them. Then the signal cut off. When Zorath Command sent drones to investigate, the images they received froze every heart in their empire. A field of wreckage drifted in silence, but not the kind they had expected. The ships weren't destroyed in open battle. They were disabled. Every power core had been shut down at the same time, every engine silent, every system dead. No one could explain it. Within hours, more fleets went dark. The AIs running the Zorath systems began to malfunction. They couldn't predict the humans' movements because the humans weren't following patterns. They were acting like no machine ever could, emotional, random, yet somehow perfectly effective. To the Zorath, who trusted machines more than instinct, this was chaos. To humanity, it was just another Tuesday. Inside Human Command, there were no grand speeches or shining halls, just tired officers, calm voices, and fast decisions. They had prepared this operation for months, not to show dominance, but to make sure it ended quickly. They had learned from the first war that the galaxy feared them more than it understood them. So this time, they made sure no one could witness their methods. Every attack was surgical, precise, and silent. Human engineers had built a system called the Net. It wasn't a weapon, not in the usual sense. It was a massive network of microsatellites hidden across space, designed to disrupt the flow of energy in enemy systems. When activated, it could make even the most advanced ships lose power for just a few minutes. A few minutes were all humanity needed. When a Zorath ship went dark, human strike teams appeared out of nowhere, small, fast vessels that fired only once. They didn't destroy the ship. They cut its engines, sliced its communication arrays, and left it drifting. Then they moved on. They didn't waste resources finishing what was already broken. In a matter of days, the mighty Zorath armada began collapsing from the inside out. Fleets lost contact with each other, captains panicked, and AIs shut down from confusion. Their own systems, built to handle logic, couldn't handle the unpredictability of human tactics. By the fifth day, more than half the invasion fleet was gone. The rest tried to retreat, but when they turned back, they found the jump gates dead, sabotaged by human engineers weeks before the invasion even began. The Zorath were trapped. The humans didn't attack in rage or pride. They simply did what needed to be done. Every movement was cold and precise. They didn't want war, but if war came, they made sure it ended fast. Across the galaxy, live sensors picked up faint energy readings. Then silence. When the smoke cleared, only a few Zorath ships managed to escape. They carried with them a horror they couldn't explain. Their officers described being hunted by ships that moved faster than light, by weapons that didn't make sound, by enemies who seemed to know every move before it was made. The truth was simpler. The humans had mapped every path the Zorath would take before the war began. They didn't see the future. They just understood their enemy better than the enemy understood themselves. When the last of the Zorath armada vanished, the humans sent a single message to the entire galaxy. War doesn't prove who's strong. It only shows who's still learning. That short sentence became a warning written in history books across 1,000 worlds. The galaxy finally understood what they were facing, a species that had no interest in conquest, yet could wipe out empires without raising their voice. The Zorath Empire withdrew from every border they had claimed. Their leaders stopped appearing in public. Their mighty fleets were never rebuilt. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy entered a new kind of peace, one born not from treaties or fear of gods, but from the silent respect for humanity's power. The most surprising part was what humanity did after the war. They didn't expand. They didn't invade. They didn't demand anything. They went back to building, exploring, and living as if nothing had happened. To them, war wasn't something to celebrate. It was something to avoid. But if it came, they knew exactly how to end it. Other species couldn't understand it. They were used to victors taking spoils, carving territories, showing trophies. But humanity didn't want thrones. They wanted quiet skies. That's what made them different. It wasn't their technology or weapons that scared the galaxy the most. It was their mindset. The idea that they could fight without hatred, destroy without cruelty, and win without pride. In the silence that followed, even the oldest empires began to change. They started to teach their soldiers what humanity had reminded them, that survival isn't just about power, but about understanding. From that day on, whenever a new conflict began anywhere in the galaxy, one phrase was always spoken before the first shot was fired. Remember Earth. Remember what happened to those who thought they could win easily. And in that warning was a truth that echoed across the stars. The humans didn't seek war, but when they entered one, entire armies just vanished. After the fall of the Zorath Empire, the galaxy entered a strange silence. There were no celebrations, no announcements, no grand victories. The humans said nothing. Their fleets disappeared back into the shadows of deep space. Their soldiers returned to their stations, and their worlds went quiet again, just like before. But across the stars, no one could sleep easily anymore. The other species called it the quiet fear. It was not the kind of fear that made people scream. It was the kind that sat deep in the chest, cold and heavy. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but everyone knew. The humans had changed the galaxy forever. Entire empires began questioning themselves. Governments fell. Commanders resigned. The Galactic Council held endless meetings trying to understand what had happened. How could a species that had entered the galactic stage barely a century ago bring down one of the most powerful empires in existence, and then just walk away like it was nothing? The Council's analysts spent months reviewing every battle log, every signal trace, every rumor, but all they could find was confusion. The humans' weapons, their ships, their tactics, and everything was unpredictable. Even the best strategists couldn't find a pattern. It was as if the humans fought not with machines, but with instinct, pure, terrifying instinct. And yet, there was something even more unsettling. Despite their strength, the humans didn't act like conquerors. They didn't occupy planets, didn't demand surrender, didn't even send ambassadors to boast of victory. It was as if the war had never happened. That quietness frightened the galaxy even more than their power. One council member said during a private meeting, "If they had taken the Zorath worlds, we could have understood it. But this silence means they don't want our land. They want something else. And that's what scares me. What humanity wanted, no one knew." In the months that followed, strange reports began to spread. Merchant ships claimed they saw human vessels patrolling the edges of uncharted space. Some said they found abandoned Zorath ships drifting silently, their entire crews missing but the hulls untouched. Others whispered about massive human structures being built on forgotten moons. Not military bases, but something bigger. But no one dared to go near. A trading convoy once tried to enter one of those restricted zones, hoping to gather data or resources. They sent a signal requesting permission to pass. The humans didn't respond, but when the convoy crossed the invisible boundary, all of their systems shut down instantly. They floated helplessly for hours until human ships arrived. The humans didn't destroy them. They simply towed them back to safe space, restored their power, and sent a short message. "Do not enter again. This place is not for war." That single message spread across the galaxy like fire. It showed something the Council didn't expect, that the humans were protecting something. But what? Speculations grew wild. Some believed they had discovered ancient alien technology. Others said they were hiding a secret weapon. A few whispered that humans had made contact with something beyond the known galaxy, something that had taught them the art of disappearing enemies, but no one could prove anything. The galaxy's great scientists tried to make sense of it. They studied human behavior, history, even their old wars on Earth, and what they found made many civilizations uneasy. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting each other before they ever reached the stars. They had learned every form of war: land, sea, air, cyber, psychological. They had fought with sticks, swords, missiles, and machines. They had survived everything: plagues, famines, nuclear fear, global conflicts. And every time they had rebuilt themselves, It was said that humans never stopped adapting. Where other species feared loss, humans learned from it. Where others broke, humans grew harder. To many alien scholars, it became clear this was the real reason entire armies vanished when humanity entered the battlefield. It wasn't magic or technology or luck. It was understanding. Humans understood how to survive. As these ideas spread, the galaxy began to see humanity in a different light. Some admired them. Some feared them. Some wanted to ally with them. But all of them agreed on one thing. You could never underestimate a human. However, while the galaxy obsessed over their strength, the humans were facing something else, the weight of their own actions. On Earth, the people didn't celebrate the Zorath defeat. The news channels didn't show victory parades. Instead, they showed the faces of those who had been lost in the silent wreckage of distant ships. Even though they had won, the cost of war was still heavy. In quiet rooms across human colonies, leaders met to discuss the future. They knew the galaxy now feared them, and that fear could easily turn to hate. So they made a choice, to withdraw from galactic politics, to observe from afar, and to prepare for something bigger than war. Because humanity had learned something important during those conflicts. Every empire that rose with pride eventually fell under its own shadow. They didn't want to be the next empire to crumble. Instead, they began building a network of peacekeepers, humans who would travel across the stars not as soldiers, but as mediators. They would go where tensions rose and try to calm things before they turned into wars. Many species didn't trust them at first, but after seeing what humans could do, no one wanted to test their patience. One of the most remarkable moments came when two ancient rival civilizations, the Vunari and the Drakel, were on the edge of war over a resource-rich moon. For decades, they had fought in small skirmishes, but when the humans arrived to mediate, everything changed. They didn't threaten either side. They didn't show force. They simply showed what war could do, a collection of images from destroyed worlds, silent ships, and forgotten soldiers. Then they said one simple line, "Power means nothing when no one is left to see it." That line spread faster than any broadcast. It became a proverb across the galaxy, repeated in schools, military academies, and council chambers. In time, even those who once feared humanity began to respect them. They started calling humans the keepers of balance. But in the hidden corners of the galaxy, not everyone was at peace with it. Some remnants of the fallen empires began gathering in secret. They were filled with bitterness and revenge. To them, humanity had humiliated their ancestors. They swore they would find a way to strike back. They studied human tactics, stole technology, and experimented with new weapons. But even as they plotted, strange things kept happening. Their bases would be discovered before construction was finished. Their ships would malfunction without warning. Their secret transmissions would vanish mid-signal. It was as if humanity knew every move before it happened. Rumors began again. Whispers that the humans had eyes everywhere, that they could see across space through machines, that they had built something invisible watching over the entire galaxy. No one knew if that was true. But one thing was certain, no one dared to test it. Years passed and the galaxy learned to live under that invisible watch. Wars became rarer, not because everyone had changed, but because everyone remembered what had happened when the humans entered the battlefield. Still, deep down the question never went away. What were the humans preparing for? Their silence wasn't the silence of peace anymore. It was the silence of anticipation. They were building something, quietly, carefully, as if they knew that one day, something far worse than war would come from beyond the edge of the stars. And when that day arrived, they wanted to be ready. The galaxy watched from afar, wondering if the humans were protecting themselves, or protecting everyone else. Whatever the truth was, one thing remained clear. Humanity had earned their place among the stars. Not by force, not by fear, but by the quiet strength that made entire armies vanish without a trace, and yet left no hatred behind. They had become the mystery and the warning of the galaxy, the ones who could destroy but chose not to. And somewhere, far from any known world in the silent dark of space, a small human vessel floated near a vast uncharted region. Inside it, a single officer looked out at the stars and whispered to the ship's recorder, "We're not done yet. Something's coming." And when it does, the galaxy will need us again. The signal was never broadcast, but somehow across countless worlds, beings of every kind felt a quiet shiver, as if the universe itself had just taken a breath before the next storm. The humans had gone silent again. But everyone knew what that meant. When they entered the battlefield next time, the stars themselves might go dark. Years passed quietly after the wars. The stars seemed calmer. The once feared empires learned to talk before they fought, trade before they threatened. The Galaxy Council often said that peace had returned because everyone was tired of destruction. But deep down, every leader knew the real reason. It was because humanity was still watching. Their silence was louder than any fleet. They had no need to show power anymore. The galaxy had seen what happened when humans entered the battlefield. Entire armies disappeared, and no one even knew how. So everyone respected the quiet. But peace built on fear is never true peace. It's just a pause before something bigger. At first, small things began to change. Deep space probes started vanishing near the edge of known space. Merchant ships, traveling near uncharted regions, reported hearing strange energy signals. Low, pulsing sounds that didn't match any known frequency. Some said it felt alive. When the Galactic Council tried to investigate, their drones stopped responding. They assumed it was interference, maybe an old mining field. But humanity knew better. Their sensors had picked up those signals long before anyone else. They had been tracking them for years quietly, without saying a word. Then one day, a human research station on the edge of the Orion sector sent out a distress call. It lasted only 8 seconds. Just a voice, shaky, breaking through static. "It's not from here. It's not..." And then silence. No wreckage, no explosion, no trace. The station had simply vanished. For the first time in decades, humanity called an emergency council, not with politicians, but with scientists, explorers, and commanders. They didn't panic, but their faces were grave. They had seen enough to know that this wasn't a normal event. Something had crossed into their space, and something powerful, something unknown. They didn't tell the rest of the galaxy right away. They wanted to confirm what they were facing. Secret expeditions were launched to the edges of human territory. What they found there would change everything. Floating in the darkness was a structure, not natural, not human, and not built by any known species. It was massive, stretching across the horizon like a sleeping giant. Its surface shimmered faintly, almost like it was breathing. It gave off energy readings beyond any known measurement, but it wasn't active. It was waiting. Human scientists called it the Gate. At first, they thought it was a relic of some ancient civilization. But when their scanners got too close, the structure responded. It sent out a pulse soft but powerful enough to disable every human ship nearby. And then, for a brief moment, the humans heard a message. It wasn't in any language they knew. It was more like a feeling, a deep echoing sound that carried a single thought. "We are coming home." The humans pulled back immediately. They didn't attack. They didn't provoke it. They just watched. That was their way. Understand before you act. When the Galactic Council found out, fear spread faster than light. Every species began mobilizing fleets, building weapons, preparing for war. But humanity didn't move. They knew that rushing blindly could lead to extinction. They had learned, from history, panic was the first step toward destruction. Instead, they began to prepare quietly. The same hidden network that once made enemy fleets vanish came back to life. Human ships started positioning across the stars, not to invade, but to protect. They didn't call it a war effort. They called it the Wall of Silence. Meanwhile, strange signals began echoing from deep space. Planets at the edge of the galaxy started losing contact. Entire systems went dark overnight. When scouts were sent to investigate, they found the same thing. Nothing. Just empty worlds and silent cities, as if every living thing had been erased. The galaxy was terrified, and in that fear everyone turned to the same direction: Earth. The world that had once made armies vanish was now seen as the last line of defense. When the Council finally sent a plea for help, humanity didn't hesitate. They didn't send speeches or demands. They just sent one message back. We'll handle it. It was the same calm, confident tone that had made empires tremble before. Within days, human fleets began moving. But this time, there was something different about them. They weren't carrying heavy weapons or super lasers. Instead, they carried something the other species didn't understand. Massive arrays of energy projectors, communication beacons, and what looked like ancient symbols etched into their hulls. When asked what those were, one human commander simply said, "They're not weapons, they're messages." The galaxy didn't understand. They thought the humans had finally gone mad. How could they fight something that erased entire worlds with messages? But the humans remembered something from their own history, that not every battle is won by strength. Some are won by understanding. As the strange energy from the gate spread wider, it began to distort space itself. Ships couldn't travel through certain regions anymore. Lights from distant stars bent in strange ways. It was as if the universe itself was shifting. Then the gate opened. For the first time, the galaxy saw what lay beyond. A wave of energy burst out, and with it came thousands of strange shapes, not ships, not life as anyone knew it. They moved like shadows in the dark, silent, smooth, unstoppable. Wherever they passed, systems went black. The galaxy's fleets tried to fight. Their lasers and missiles passed through the creatures like smoke. Their shields failed instantly. The great powers that had once ruled the stars fell within days. But when the Shadow Fleet reached the edge of human space, everything changed. The humans were waiting. They didn't attack right away. Instead, their ships activated the network, the same one that had once made armies vanish. Across light years, millions of small satellites came online, creating a massive energy field that surrounded the human border. When the shadows entered, they slowed down. For the first time, they were affected by something. The humans had figured out that these beings didn't feed on energy. They fed on thought, on awareness itself. So the humans did what no other species could. They turned everything off. In that moment, human space went completely dark. Every ship, every station, every city, powered down. From the outside, it looked like humanity had vanished. But inside the silence, they were still there, waiting, hidden, united. They had learned long ago how to survive in darkness. The Shadow Fleet entered the dead zone, searching, reaching, but finding nothing. They moved deeper, confused by the emptiness. And then the humans struck, not with fire, but with sound. A deep, synchronized pulse echoed through space, a frequency built to disrupt the very core of the invaders' energy. It wasn't a weapon of destruction, but a call. The same kind of message the gate had sent out before. For a few moments, the entire galaxy watched as light rippled across human space. The shadows twisted and folded in on themselves as if recognizing the signal. Then, one by one, they began to dissolve, not exploding, not dying, just fading away. When the last wave passed, the gate dimmed. The energy readings dropped to 0. The silence that followed felt endless. Slowly, lights came back on across human systems. Ships powered up again. The galaxy waited, breathless, for a human explanation. When a human transmission finally came through, it said something no one expected. They weren't enemies. They were lost. We just helped them go home. The council didn't understand, but they didn't question it either. They had learned long ago that when humans said something like that, it was better to listen. In the days that followed, human fleets dismantled the gate piece by piece, scattering its fragments into deep space so it could never be used again. Then once again, they went silent. No monuments, no victory speeches, just quiet. And as the galaxy slowly returned to peace, everyone knew the same truth. Humanity had not only saved themselves, but everyone. They had done it not with pride or power, but with something the galaxy had almost forgotten: understanding. From that day onward, every young cadet, every scholar, every explorer learned the same lesson. When the humans stand silent, something powerful is about to happen. and when they finally speak, the galaxy listens. In time, humanity became the symbol of balance, not feared, but respected. Their strength wasn't in weapons, but in wisdom. They had seen darkness, both outside and within themselves, and turned it into light. And as the stars drifted peacefully again, a single voice recorded in Earth's archives said, "We don't fight for power. We fight for peace, even when the universe forgets what that means." Far beyond the edge of the galaxy, faint echoes of that message still traveled through space. A reminder that once, when the galaxy trembled, it was humanity that stood firm. And when they entered the battlefield, even the darkness itself vanished.